Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan. I'll be your host on this Saturday, October 2nd, 2021. We have a lot of things to talk about, and I have just 6.5 minutes here tonight. Gulf low that's been out there, powerful early fall storm, and the interior winter storm will be winding down overnight into Sunday. We'll take a look at some stats. Typhoon Mindel, with the remnants of that typhoon, is going to develop a bearing low just off the Kamchatka Peninsula with a strong occluded front that'll be impacting the west here as we head through early next week, bringing elevated surf, perhaps 1 to 2 inches of rainfall along the coast with some snow in the higher coastal elevations, and potentially blizzard conditions in the northwest Arctic coast. That's not a certainty yet, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. And overall, looks like a rather wet pattern that'll include rain and snow will be centered on the southwest portion of the state between October 8th and the 10th. Let's take a look at some of these rain totals. Petersburg's Co-op, over 3.5 inches of rain. That's a daily record. Pelican, nearly 3.5 inches of rain. Ketchikan Airport, second most for this day, 3.74 inches of rainfall. And Sitka Airport had over 2.5 inches of rain, and Juneau nearly 2 inches. Look at these wind gusts. Eagle Crest FAA had a wind gust to 93 miles an hour. Clarence Strait, a gust to 91 miles an hour at Lincoln Island. Ketchikan Airport, a gust to 83 miles an hour. And Sitka Airport, a hurricane force gust to 75 miles an hour. So very impressive. We continue to see the advisories and warnings that were in effect across the Panhandle have been allowed to expire, as has the winter weather advisory for the Copper River Basin, where anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of snow fell. But we still have winter storm warnings in effect through Sunday morning, afternoon, and even early evening in the southeast interior, especially toward the Elkhorn border. And the winter weather advisory, the central Alaska range on up to the Yukon River toward Fairbanks and Fort Yukon till 6 a.m. Sunday morning. And the winter storm warning along the north slope up to the northeast Arctic coast will be in effect until 6 a.m. Sunday morning as well, where some additional light snow will fall here tonight. Otherwise, here is a powerful area of low pressure. You can see the circulation in the cloud cover. We still have a low there out over the Gulf of Alaska, a couple of centers extending northeastward up into the Yukon, and even reports of some thunderstorms with hail around Ketchikan and Sitka today. So it's been a very active system out to the west. So you see the bright white cloud tops toward the western and beyond the western Aleutians. And the remnants of that typhoon are going to help spin up a pretty strong bearing low here as we head into tomorrow and early in the week, bringing a strong occluded front to the west coast. So here's today's weather map. We see one area of low pressure there out over the north central Gulf, extending northeastward up into northwest Canada. And then back to the west, still just a weaker air trough of low pressure. It'll try to push inland into the west. And there's a ridge of high pressure right now that's at least along the west side of the state, and colder northerly flow. I might see some breaks in the cloud as that pushes in and as that weak ridge pushes inland over the next day, Sunday into Monday. But there comes that bearing low that's associated with the remnants of the typhoon. It'll bottom out somewhere just above 960 millibars, so it'll have plenty of wind and rain. There's also a push of milder air out ahead of it, so temperatures will briefly warm along the Aleutian chain up into the Alaska Peninsula as that front works its way eastward into Monday. And with it, there will be some rain and gusty winds along with elevated surf along much of the west coast. So here on the low temperatures as we go through Sunday morning, upper 30s, around 40 degrees in the Panhandle, below freezing across the south central interior. And then Sunday afternoon highs generally in the 40s most everywhere, though cooler at Glen Ellen, 38, also at McGrath. And then low temperatures Monday morning will generally stay above freezing, mid to maybe upper 30s in the Panhandle. But other areas, if you get any breaks in clouds, it's going to easily get down well below freezing in the teens and 20s in some areas. Still holding up, though, around freezing at Kodiak and along coastal areas of the northern Gulf. Monday afternoon, look for highs generally across the region in the 40s, except for the normally cool spots around the Alaska range will remain in the 30s along the Arctic coast. Lows will generally be below freezing in the 20s, some teens, the Brooks Range, and then high temperatures across much of the region just generally confined to the 30s, with readings probably not getting above freezing there along the Arctic coast. Colder Monday morning to get a little clearing. That ridge of high pressure, many lows will get down into the teens. And then as we get into Monday afternoon, we'll see temperatures below freezing, mainly in the 20s across the North Slope, Brooks Range, and Arctic coast. 30s elsewhere, maybe 40-ish at Nome, and as we get down toward Imanak. And then looking at the southwestern portion of the state, lows Sunday morning will dip down below freezing, well into the 20s, where skies are clear to partly cloudy. Otherwise, lower 40s out across the Aleutians. Temperatures Sunday afternoon will be back up in the 30s across the interior, lower to mid 40s along the southwest coast, Bristol Bay down into the Alaska Peninsula, with some readings getting up into the lower 50s out across the central western Aleutians. Monday morning, look for lows again in the interior, below freezing, generally in the 20s, and then extending out along the Alaska Peninsula 30s with 40s once you get out there across the Aleutian chain. And temperatures Monday afternoon will be briefly milder out across the Alaska Peninsula up into the lower 50s, though the interior, as you get up the upper Kuskokwim and Yukon Valleys, temperatures will still generally only be in the upper 30s to near 40 degrees. And a quick check of the temperature outlook as we go through October 8th through the 12th. We are looking for temperatures to be near or a bit below normal. The best chance of a below normal temperatures will be across the southeast, particularly the Panhandle. But here's the thing I want to show you. A very good chance of above normal precipitation across the southwestern portion of the state, especially through the interior, which would mean rain and snow at this time of year. It looks like the storm pattern will remain active coming in off of the Bering, so that'll keep things going here as we get into the second week then of October. So keep that in mind. It looks like we're not going to see any really mild weather now the rest of this year.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time for your flying weather. If you are planning a flight Sunday into Monday, we'll watch an area of low pressure out over the north central Gulf continue to slowly fill and weaken, and conditions will gradually be improving along the Gulf Coast. Meanwhile, there will be a ridge of high pressure out along the western part of the state that will give way to first a lead trough of low pressure, and then a stronger occluded front will be moving into the western portion of the state early next week, and a stronger low back out through the western Bering off the Kamchatka Peninsula. Could see central pressure just above 960 millibars. But for Sunday morning, look for IFR conditions along the spine there of the Brooks Range, North Slope to around Prudhoe Bay on over to Gordon, and then also down along the Alcan border, the east central interior into Wrangell, St. Elias. And the IFR conditions there associated with winter weather, and then a broad area of IFR out over the central Bering, including St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew. For Sunday afternoon, we will see still IFR conditions along portions of the North Slope and Arctic coast, but MVFR will be the rule across much of east central into the Panhandle, and then back to the west. You can see the initial push there associated with the occluded front with the IFR conditions approaching Nunavik Island, and then back out through the central Bering. And as that occluded front works its way eastward on Monday, we will see IFR conditions in a band out over the eastern Bering, approaching and moving into the west and southwest coast, and another area of IFR conditions from the central interior northward across the central and eastern Brooks Range, North Slope, and Arctic coast. And then finally, Monday afternoon, look for a band of IFR conditions extending from portions of the Alaska Peninsula up into the southwest interior, including the southwest portion of the Seward Peninsula, and IFR conditions also back there toward the central western Aleutians and off the northwest coast. So past conditions on Sunday, Anativik will be IFR becoming MVFR, with more in the way of IFR conditions as you fly farther north. Same thing for Adigan, IFR becoming MVFR with IFR conditions up there along the North Slope, Arctic coast. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill should both start out MVFR becoming VFR. And Rainy Pass should generally see MVFR conditions throughout the day on Sunday. Windy Pass also generally MVFR conditions on Sunday. And for Isabel, look for IFR conditions farther north of the north entrance, whereas it'll be VFR further south of the south entrance. So overall, Isabel will generally see MVFR conditions throughout the day Sunday. Mentasta will be stuck IFR. Still some wintry weather remaining there and up along the Alcan border. And then Tanita is looking for VFR conditions on Sunday, as will Portage enjoy VFR conditions. Further to the east, Chilkoot and White should improve to MVFR during the day for Sunday. And a look at freezing levels. We have the surface freezing level all the way down there to the entry there of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest side of Kodiak Island, otherwise much of the mainland in the morning. There will be temperatures at or below freezing, with the warmest or highest freezing levels out there toward the central and western Aleutians, up around 10,000 feet, in response to a push of milder air coming in with the remnants of a typhoon. And so that is going to provide relatively some mild air working its way eastward across the Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula as we go through the early and middle part of next week. And a checking of icing, greatest threat is above 5,000 feet across portions of the southeast into the lower Gulf, as well as back out into the Bering Sea around St. Matthew, southwest there of St. Lawrence, between 11,000 and a flight level of 18,000 feet. The interior will see areas generally above 2,000 or 3,000 feet, especially along the Alcan border. Upper level jet stream winds strongest. We have a jet core over 125 knots there up through British Columbia. Another one coming out of the northwest, coming down along the west side of the state, upwards around 105 to 115 knots, and then a strong jet core out there in the western Aleutians up to 135 knots. That's going to help spin up that stronger low off the Kamchatka Peninsula. You can see a broad band in the mid-levels, winds in excess of 50 to 75 knots there out through the western Bering and western Aleutians. And dropping down to 3,000 feet, we see a stronger circulation there off the Kamchatka coast, spreading those stronger winds into the Bering. And the best chance of turbulence, a little pocket in the northeast, but mainly the Alaska Peninsula, perhaps some isolated severe turbulence, and extending back out into the central western Aleutians below 4,000 feet. So have a safe flight if you are planning to head out.
You guys got everything tied down back there? Yeah. Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above, and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. But they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires.
And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Whoa, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where are you on?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
There's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan in the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
Yeah, I was going to say,
this was
look at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska, but that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly my son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, ICESat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the ICESat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time for our marine weather segment and looking at the sea ice edge. One notable thing is that the ice that managed to survive the new ice from last season to this season now gets to be counted as part of the multi-year ice. So it is its birthday. We reached the minimum ice extent back on September 16th, and since then we've begun to see some ice forming now along the Arctic northwest coast. And that'll be continue to be the case here as we slide through the fall and enter winter. Also, a little bit of ice beginning to show up in portions of Kotzebue Sound. Well, taking a look at the winds, they have certainly come down after storm force and hurricane force wind gust along the Panhandle. Winds on Sunday, inner waterways will generally be between 10 and 20 knots. Waves still up around 9 feet once you get south of Ketchikan. And along the outer coast there, 15 to 25 knots west of Craig, with waves still 13 to 14 feet, falling off to around or less than 10 feet at Yakutat. And then Monday, winds down considerably. The inner waterways, canals, we're looking at 10 to 15 knot winds out of the north-northwest with waves only 2 to 3 feet. And off of the coast, in the Gulf, we are looking for winds 5 to 10 knots with more of a northeasterly flow in some areas offshore and waves 6 to perhaps as high as 8 feet. Across south central areas on Sunday, winds will also be coming down, though still 40-knot gales coming out of the mouth of Cook Inlet and northeast there and east of Kodiak with waves 8-9 feet. Otherwise, look for generally northerly winds, the northern two-thirds of Cook Inlet as well as Prince William Sound with waves running a few feet. Monday, a pretty quiet day. Winds will be generally variable around 10 knots, though trying to turn more southwesterly there at the mouth of Cook Inlet and off of south of the Kenai. 15 knots and waves there 3-4 feet at best. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will still be out of the northwest, anywhere from about 30 to 35 knots there through Shelikof Strait, 7-footers, and off of Chiknik with 11-footers possible. Otherwise, on the Bering side, look for northwest winds at about 25 to 30 knots, waves 7 to 8 feet. And those winds will be turning more southwesterly, picking up from 15 knots around Kodiak Island to 25 knots there toward the tip of the Alaska Peninsula with waves that way 6 to 8 feet. As an occluded front approaches from the west, we'll see winds eastern Aleutians 20-25 knots from the south, picking up to 35 to 45 knot gales west of Adak, with waves building anywhere from 11 to as high as 20 feet west of Kiska. And then as the main core of storm force winds pass north of the Aleutians on Monday, we'll see winds across most of the area out of the southwest around 30 knots, and waves 10 feet on the North Pacific side and generally 8 feet on the Bering side, though once you get west of Adak, waves will build from 14 feet upwards to around 20 feet west of Kiska. Along the west coast, winds will be turning more toward the south ahead of that approaching occluded front around 20 knots, and waves generally in the open waters around 6 feet. And by Monday, that's where that occluded front will work its way into the region, trying to shift winds from south to southwesterly. And that'll bring in some stronger winds around 30 knots, which will also enhance the potential for some elevated surf and coastal erosion. Waves could build upwards of 10 to nearly 18 feet as you get towards St. Matthew. And then along the Arctic coast on Sunday, winds will be out of the northeast at 15 knots with waves running a few feet. Generally easterly off of the northwest coast there at 10 knots and waves a few feet, and then turning a little more northerly through the Bering Strait with waves there 3 to maybe 6 feet north of St. Lawrence. And then across the region on Monday, look for winds out of the east-southeast along the Arctic coast and northwest coast, 15 knots there in the north, picking up to 20 to 25 knots the lower Chukchi Sea and getting down toward the Bering Strait with waves down that way around 5 feet. And finally, taking a look at the surface weather maps for Sunday, we'll continue to watch that area of low pressure weaken across the northern Gulf. And then back to the west, the remnants of the typhoon are going to help spin up a powerful low there off the Kamchatka Peninsula, and may bottom out just above 960 millibars as we head into the day and early next week. That occluded front will have a push of a little warmer air up through the Aleutian chain into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, there'll be some pretty good rains along the coastal areas of the west, perhaps an inch or two with some snow in the interior, higher elevations. And we'll have to keep an eye on for the potential for perhaps a chance of some blizzard conditions along the northwest coast as we head into the day on Tuesday. So that's my time for tonight. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.